Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to this monthly webinar on radioactive waste management. Today we're going to present the case of Slovakia. As you know now, all of you, this webinar is trying to disseminate results from the deliverable 917 from Roots. You will find it actually now published on the website of ARAD. I will send in the chat the recording, the link to the recording. You will also be able to find it on the YouTube description for those who watch later this recording. As you know, the case in this deliverable were intended to cover early or advanced programs and both large and small inventories. The development of site selection in those cases, with regard to transparency and public participation following the criteria of the Aarhus Convention and the BEPPER report from NTW. And this webinar series will end in December. We started in January 2023, ran every month, and will finish in December. All recording are on the YouTube channel. So last time we had the Green Lake case. Today is the Slovakian case. Next month will be the German case, and that I will be presenting on the behalf of Rebecca Harms. And in December it will be the Czech case presented by Anna Kombalinkova to conclude this webinar series.
So thank you for this opportunity to present the situation in Slovakia in terms of transparency and public participation in radioactive waste management. I will go right to the point. So if you need to leave this sooner, then the main result is that Slovakia in general is far from a positive role model in terms of transparency and public participation. It's true that we had or experienced some minor positive changes during the previous years, but the development in the near future seems to be quite negative. One reason is that during the past 2 years, significant legislative changes were adopted in the construction and spatial planning, and also in the EIA legislation. And this will have significantly negative impacts on public participation. And not only according to my opinion, but also according to Via Juris, which is an NGO of lawyers, and also according to the President of the Slovak Republic, it's non-compliant with the Aarhus Convention, which was also written in the statement, according to which the President vetoed this new EIA legislation. The problem is also that there is a strong support of these legislative changes across the political spectrum. So there is a little chance that something happens in the future. And also as a result of the recent elections and the results of these elections, the situation and the new government will probably be even less willing to make some positive changes. I think the opposite will be true. Just a short overview how it looks like in Slovakia. The nuclear industry is located mainly in 2 sites in the western part of the country, in Jaslovské Bohunice and in Mochovce. There are operating nuclear reactors in both sites, and there are also some radioactive waste treatment and storage facilities in both sides. So, for example, in Jaslovské Bohonice, there is interim storage. There are facilities for treatment of radioactive waste, including 2 incinerators. In Mochovce, there is a low-level waste repository, and just recently there was one nuclear reactor which was put into operation, and it reached 100% performance or power, I think, in September. The main actors here in Slovakia are these 3. The first of them is Javis, which is a state-owned company, which is responsible for the radioactive waste management, storage of spent fuel, the deep geological repository, and also the decommissioning of nuclear power plants. And it has a monopolistic position in these activities. So in the de facto, no one else can do this. The reactors which are still in operation are owned by the Slovenské elektrárne, which is the main electric energy producer in Slovakia. And there is also a joint venture called JSS, which is a joint venture of the Czech energy company ČEZ and the Slovak Javis. And this is responsible for the new nuclear power plant in Jaslovské Bohonice. In terms of transparency, we had really big problems with access to information since Javis, the monopolistic company which is responsible for radioactive waste management in Slovakia, claimed not to be a liable entity according to the Freedom of Information Act. So they did not respond to our requests of information, and we couldn't get information from them by this way, which was a big problem because the alternative sources, the possible alternative sources could not be used, like the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, because they did not possess the required information. And these were even the quite simple information, like the volumes of the incinerated radioactive waste. It looks like the situation should have changed a little bit in the positive direction, because there was an amendment of the Freedom of Information Act in December 2022, but we haven't tested it yet, so I cannot be sure about whether it was improved or not, because it's still only our explanation or reading of the law, and maybe Avis reads it differently. So we will see in the near future. But what certainly improved is that Javis started publishing monthly data about radioactive waste incineration on its website. They were quite reluctant to do this, but they were forced by the results of the EIA process, where the public requested this, and the Ministry of Environment put this into the conditions of the environmental impact statement. So now we have quite not the best, but relatively good overview of what they incinerate, how much from the foreign countries and how much from Slovakia, from which sources and so on, how much ash they produced. Also, another improvement is that the Atomic Act no longer allows for classification of documents on such grounds as the banking secrecy, postal secrecy, or telecommunication secrecy, which again was not initiative of the Slovak Republic itself, but this is the result of a non-compliance result of the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee. But when they changed this at the same time, they also put a new reason for marking as confidential, and it's the intellectual property. In terms of transparency, a big problem is, or in access to information, the big problem is that you have the de facto right to access the information, but it's quite difficult. It usually means physical inspection of written or of paper files, hundreds or thousands of pages at the Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which is quite problematic. So it would be much better if this documentation is available in electronic form, because usually you need only a piece of information, but first you need to know which one is interesting for you. So you have to scroll through all of it. Also, in terms of consultation with independent experts, such option is more or less just a theoretical option, because first, the procedural deadlines are quite short, so you don't have time to hire someone and for him to go through the documentation and somehow process it. You do not have the money to pay him, and even if you have, there is a problem to get someone. So as a result, if the public or the municipalities read something, that's only the EIA documentation, which is published online. But the problem is that this is more or less put in phrasing and in such a form which is in favor of the proposer, because he pays for it. And then we come to the conclusion that there is a strong information asymmetry between the public and the municipalities on one side and the nuclear industry on the other side. And the public has a quite problem to get information which is complete, objective, and which is easily to verify. What is quite good in Slovakia, I think, in comparison to other countries, is that you can take part or participate in almost every process and procedure, unless the supervising authority proves that your rights cannot be affected in that procedure, and there is your right to protection of the environment. So usually it's not a problem to be a part, to take a part. But the new legislation might slightly restrict this. And also the problem is that even if you can participate, the problem is the effectivity of this participation. Because, as already mentioned, there is a problem to get the information and and then to make statements according to that. And also, the deadlines are quite short. For example, if there are some construction processes at the Nuclear Regulatory Authority for the nuclear facilities, then it's quite common that you have only 7 days from the announcement until the deadline to send the statement. And within that 7 days, you have to also go through the documentation to make the physical inspection and so on. And it looks like there is minimal, or I would say no effort from the main actors, from the authorities, to encourage the public to participate in a more active way, because the conditions are set in such a way that it's more or less it's very difficult for the public and the mayors of the villages. Also, formally, you can challenge any ruling of an administrative procedure at the court if you were a participant of that procedure, and you have 2 months to do that. The problem is that you usually do not have sufficient financial resources to do that, and also it can take 1 to 2 or maybe even more years to until you get the ruling of that court. But still, there are some positive examples. So, for example, the public was able, through both participation and public pressure, to was able to achieve the prohibition of concluding new contracts for foreign radioactive incineration in Slovakia. This does not mean that the radioactive waste from foreign countries is banned in Slovakia. It's still the incineration is still in progress because there were contracts which were signed before this prohibition took effect. In terms of resourcing, the National Nuclear Fund Act states that its resources can be used also for engagement of public in decision-making processes and also for communication with the public, but only in relation to projects of radioactive waste and spent fuel repositories. It cannot be used according to this law in relation to other nuclear facilities. So there is no real support in the most cases, and I personally haven't heard of any application even of this financial resourcing for the radioactive waste and spent fuel repositories. The main objections about the new EIA legislation are listed here. So, for example, they were adopted without the standard legislation process. There was almost no time or no opportunity for the public to participate in the legislative process. In many cases, this would mean that the public will lose the opportunity to appeal. Also, the expert judgment in the EIA process was removed as an obligatory and integral part of the process. The public and the municipalities will no longer have the right to comment on the EIA scoping. And also, if you do not manage to send your comments or statements within the relatively short deadlines, then it will no longer be accepted. And this is quite a problem with this nuclear industry because the deadlines are the same whether there is the process for the nuclear power plant or just the small building. And that means that these deadlines are insufficient for such complex projects. Now I will present shortly some examples of what I mentioned. So, for example, when we are still having the process of updating the national policy and program for radioactive waste and spent fuel management, and this is supervised by the National Nuclear Fund. It was not envisaged, the public participation was not envisaged as a part of this process originally, and no public participants or municipalities were sought to take part in drafting this document. Our civic association was able to get into the process, but only after it filed an official request based on the Aarhus Convention. And the conditions were still such that we were not able to participate in the work group meetings. So we only commented on the draft of the document, and although most of our comments were rejected, some were accepted. So one of them is that conducting a survey of radioactive contamination and eventual rehabilitation of the Manivier water channel was incorporated into the list of objectives of the program. Then, after almost a year, the SEA process for this strategic document started. But again, there were quite significant problems, in my opinion, that this document was published on the web page of the Ministry of Environment, and the public and the municipalities, even the affected municipalities, were notified only after 3 weeks after this was published, and the public was misinformed that it's only that the deadline is already over, because it was only 15 days after publication of the ministry webpage. When the public had the opportunity to comment on the scope of this document, it was again only 10 days, and it was in August during summer holidays when many people were away and not working. And what is quite surprising and quite bad, in my opinion, is also that the villages, the municipalities from the regions where the deep geological repository is supposed to be located were not denoted as affected municipalities in this process, and they were even not addressed at all. So they were not notified. They might not even know about this taking part and taking place. And the problem is that according to this strategy, the final location of this repository is to be selected by 2030. So within the validity of this strategic document. So it does not make quite sense that these communities were not involved. When speaking about the deep geological repository, there was some work done in between 1996 and 2001. Some geological survey, feasibility studies, and as a result, 5 localities were proposed. This was done under the supervision of the Slovenské elektrárne. And then it was suspended for more than 10 years. Since 2012, this project is implemented by the Javis company, but there is a very limited progress, which can be also demonstrated by the amount of money spent on this. So within the last 10 years, less than €500,000 was spent. And actually, a lot of money was allocated for this from the nuclear fund. But even though in the years there was like 2 million or 3 million euros allocated, only a few thousands or even zero was spent. This minimal progress can be seen as can be considered as non-compliant with the principle of avoidance of any undue burden on future generations, because the Slovakia is building new reactors, is planning a new nuclear power plant in Aarhus Bohunice, but it's somehow neglecting the back-end stage of the nuclear cycle. What might, according to our opinion, slightly improve the situation is if there was a separate institution responsible for the radioactive waste and spent fuel repositories. First, because it would become the sole purpose of such institution, and then it somehow cannot argue that it has some other problems and some other projects to do at the moment, and also it might improve the access to information. Also, Yavis is also a producer of radioactive waste, so it might be in conflict of interest as both producer of radioactive waste and the institution which is responsible for repositories and accepting radioactive waste into these repositories. The Manivar water channel is a positive example of public participation, which resulted in some quite important changes. So this water channel flows from the nuclear power plant in Jaslovské Bohunice. In the 1990s, a survey confirmed that the banks of this river, of this channel, and the Dudva River are mildly radioactively contaminated. And it was also proposed that some hundreds of cubic meters of soil should be removed and placed into a controlled area. However, this never happened. And since 2019, that means after more than 20 years, the citizens from the village through which the Manivar flows have been requesting the new radiological survey and eventual rehabilitation of the banks. And it looks like it will finally happen, because this objective was put also into the EIA objectives of the EIA process for the 5th stage of the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant in Jaslovské Bohunice, and also into the National Policy and Program for Radioactive Waste Management. This one example is a negative one, because when in 2021 the nuclear industry noticed that they are not able to fulfill the conditions for starting the authorization process for construction of the new nuclear power plant in Jaslovské Bohunice. They amended the Atomic Act in order to create a new authorization process, so that with lower requirements. And this way they were able to avoid the situation where the environmental impact statement for the new nuclear power plant would have expired in May 2023. Because if they did not start the subsequent authorization process, the environmental impact statement would expire. The problem is that this nuclear power plant will not be built within the next 10, maybe 20 years. And so the future population of this area was effectively stripped of the opportunity to effectively participate in the decision-making process based on the up-to-date process in the time when the nuclear power plant will actually be constructed. The information asymmetry between the project proposer and the public, on the other side, can be demonstrated by the case of the second radioactive waste incinerator in Jaslovské Bohunice. So in 2018, Yavis submitted this project to the EIA process, justifying that they need additional capacity because they expect more than a 50% increase in the production of the Slovak radioactive waste suitable for incineration from decommissioning, and also from operation of the 3rd and 4th reactor block in Mochovce. And they did not mention anything about foreign radioactive waste being incinerated there. So the affected municipalities were quite reluctant to approve this, but finally they did. But agreed only on condition that only Slovak radioactive waste could be incinerated at this new incinerator. However, after it was commissioned in January 2022, this condition restricting the origin only to Slovak Republic was removed, and now large quantities of foreign radioactive waste have been incinerated since May 2022 at the second incinerator. And if we have a look at the reality of the origin of the incinerated radioactive waste, we can see that while in 2018 there was like 80 tons a year of the Slovak radioactive waste incinerated, this significantly decreased, and now it's below 40 tons a year. So it was not a 50% increase, but on the contrary, it was 50% decrease. What increased significantly, on the other hand, was the amount of the foreign radioactive waste, which started at the level of approximately 50 tons a year, and gradually increased over 100, and then over 200 in 2022, which made more than 80% share of the incinerated radioactive waste. And in this year, until August, more than 200 tons of the foreign radioactive waste have been incinerated, while only 33 tons of the Slovak radioactive waste were incinerated at the same time. And what is quite comical is that the Slovak radioactive waste is mostly still incinerated at the new at the old or the first incinerator plant. If you can, as you can see here, 40 tons in this year have been incinerated at the first incinerator, and only less than 6 tons have been incinerated at the second incinerator. I will skip this. And so the propositions for improvement are that it should be explicitly defined that the AVIS is a liable entity according to the Slovak Freedom of Information Act. There should be easy access to the electronic versions of the documentation. Also, legally binding resourcing of local communities and NGOs would be very beneficial. The deadlines should be extended. So, for example, during the holidays, they should be extended, and they should take into account also the complexity of the project. So if it's a larger project with a larger size of documentation, the deadline should be longer. A good example is when the European Bank for something and development, EBRD, co-financed the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant V1 in Jaslovské Bohunice. They required that the commenting on the EIA report has to take 120 days instead of regular 30. Also, the availability of independent experts would be very beneficial. Thank you for attention.
Thanks a lot, Michal. Maybe we can stop the sharing so we can exchange. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I find it personally really interesting, and I was wondering, I don't know if you mentioned it, but did you try to ask for the National Nuclear Fund for support? You said that it was foreseen that some support was allocated for public participation, at least some. Did you try to ask or to submit a request for it? And for what kind of participation this money is foreseen? And second question, you also mentioned some figures about allocated resources and said that it was not spent.
Yes.
So when it's not spent, then it's kept, and what is meant for, basically. Hope I'm clear.
Okay, so answering the first question, our association has not requested any funds from the Necro Fund. First, the first reason is that since it's not among the purposes stated in the National Nuclear Fund Act, they cannot give you the money. It should. It must be stated there that they could use it. They can use it for such purpose. So as I mentioned, only in case of public participation or public engagement in relation to repositories, this can be used. But this act was adopted only in 2018, so the time period for its application is quite short, and I still haven't heard about such usage of this money for public engagement. You see, if there is the project of the deep geological repository is more or less dead, so there is no chance to spend money on public participation because there is no progress. And the repository in Mochovce, which is used for the low-level waste, is already established. There are some modifications from time to time, but according to the law, they couldn't, for example, release the money for participation in terms of the radioactive waste incineration in Jaslovské Bohunice or something like that. So we did not even try. And the second question was what happens with the money if it's not spent. It just stays in the nuclear fund for the next year. But the problem is that the nuclear fund, it receives a lot of money. I think it's hundreds of millions it has on its accounts. Maybe some billions, but I would stick to hundreds of millions of euros. And they, according to the law, they are quite restricted on what to do with the money. So it's on some long-term saving accounts or something like that with relatively low interest at this moment, which with quite high inflation means that the money is burned without, a lot of the money is burned without some effect. So I don't know. We asked for some analysis of this in the strategic document, the National Policy and Program for the nuclear waste management. We asked them to make an impact analysis. What might this mean in the future? So,
thanks a lot. It's very clear. Do you have any comments or questions? Please.
I wonder if this fund, Rad Waste Management Fund, is subject of the access to public information, or it's the same status as SIAVIS, although they are also, they should be having this status to access to public information.
They are a liable entity. I already requested some information from them, and they replied. A lot of it, they did not have a lot of requested information, of course, because if you ask them about the amounts of the incinerated radioactive waste, they might have some information, but not in the form you wish. So it's quite problematic. But you have to ask this nuclear fund, this then the National Regulatory Authority, then maybe the Public Health Authority and the section of radiation protection and so on. And maybe after this, you might get some information, but it's still not the even if they have this information, it's quite complicated, and in a lot of cases they do not have the complete information you need. But it's quite good that they are part of the Ministry of Economy or something like that. So they fall under the Freedom of Information Act as the first rank liable entity, I think.
Peter, please go on and listen.
Yeah, I can add to this question because legally it is being distinguished in Slovakia whether nuclear fund is the owner of that information, which means that it did create this information and they have a right to, amend it, or whether they just got a copy of something. And as far as I know, Javis, which is abusing its legal status as a company, even though it's 100% state-owned company. Like, for example, they wanted to make sure that the nuclear fund only gets written, printed version of the documents prepared under the program of a deep geological repository program, just to prevent that the fund could actually share these documents over email, as PDFs. And then interestingly, the documents which nobody wanted to share, neither Javis nor the fund, they appeared on the website of this public procurement office because due to some conditions of the EU for public procurement of the activities for the program of the DGR development, they appeared on the internet. But this is not very uncommon in Slovakia. It even happened to me with European Investment Bank that we would have a legally valid confirmations that the documents are secret. And at the same time, I would find these documents online on the internet of the Slovak government. And in generally, it is very common that the Slovak institutions are contradicting themselves, or basically we can say lying. And even in this most extreme situation which happened now, that there were people from environmental NGOs at the Ministry of Environment, including the minister. Even when we talk about national parks, which should be the main activity of environmental NGOs, that ministry with those former NGO people would just be lying and bypassing their own laws. And in about, 3 to 6 months, I will have an academic paper published on this, so I can stop this for the moment. But this is just to say that in Slovakia, there's a huge culture of not respecting laws. And I could see that with one exception at the meeting where Michal was also present, even the environmental NGO people are now like, I don't know if I have to, how to comment. They would be careless, basically, that the ministry is disrespecting the laws which were proposed by the same ministry, which is the most extreme case. And they would even bypass democratic procedures. Because, for example, we had this major reform on national parks. It was fully prepared by the ministry, but into the parliament, they asked just few members of parliament to submit it, because that allowed them to bypass the SEA, the strategic environmental assessment procedure. So there a lot could be, said on this, and with the sensitive information, it's ideal that we can follow up in Brussels next week. And then hopefully this article that I will have published in maximum half a year can complement also our URAT documents, just to show that there is this very, very low culture of respecting Slovak laws in Slovakia.
Thanks a lot, Michal. Peter, sorry, and please do send it to me so I can add it to the YouTube description of the recording of this video when it's published. I don't know if there are any questions, and we're reaching to the end. I had actually a clarification question. I remember that the radioactive waste, I don't know if you said it, came from some foreign countries. I remember it came from Czech Republic, if I'm not wrong, for some.
Italy.
Mainly from Italy.
Italy.
Some amounts. It started in 2013 with radioactive waste from Czech Republic, but the main contract for, I think, 865 tons plus 617 cubic meters from Italy. That's the main point here. And there is also a few dozens maybe from Germany, but the bulk, the main part is from Italy.
Okay.
And it was the contract was signed years before the public knew about this. So without public consultation, without public approval, it was signed in such a way that it was impossible to cancel it without huge fines. It was the reason why the prohibition of foreign radioactive waste was adapted in such a way that only new contracts are prohibited. So they can fulfill the original contract. And also, they did not have certainly the sufficient capacity to incinerate this at that time when they signed the contract. And I think they signed it in 2015 or 16. And the second incinerator was proposed only in 2018. And the first hot test of incinerating of this radioactive waste from Italy were conducted only in 2020 or 19, I don't know, but with a quite long delay. And it was done only at the first incinerator at that time.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So I think we are reaching to the end of this this session. I don't know if Nadia, you want to say a last thing or some others?
No, thank you very much. I think the next time we will meet is the next week. The most of us in General Assembly, I hope, and also for the ICS workshop number 5. I mean, we have still some presentation to do, but now I think it's more like Niels said yesterday. We need really to make some effort to disseminate our activities, because we have activities, but they are not well disseminated. So basically, we have, Alexis, and you also collected all NTW activities relation to EURAT, and perhaps you can share this presentation with all, because then we can also make some actions, where to go, what to do, which things we need to promote, and so on. So because I think this is the 5th year of the EURAT, we should do something regarding this as well in more proactive way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia and Michal for this presentation. So speak to you soon, and see you in this webinar next month for the German case. It will be on the website actually of the calendar of the NTW website. You will have the link and information if it's not there already, and I will send it by mail also, so you can contact me. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.